Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, AJ Guyton, and I'm here with my partner, Austin Render, man. It's been a while, Austin. We have been really talked about all the bedlam and the madness that went on, the highs and the lows that we witnessed over the last week with the Purdue stellar performance and the Michigan game, which brought us back down to earth really, really quickly, man. How you doing, first of all?
Hey, I'm good, AJ. It really was like the up and downs in just 4 days. I mean, the way that team played on a Thursday and came out on a Sunday just completely differed. And I think you're right. I'm glad you texted me yesterday, said, I think we need to talk about this stuff because we should. Let's take it back to Purdue. I mean, that was one of those wins that is you saw the importance of it on the players and the fans and what it meant to the team. But from you watching it, what did Indiana do so well to get that win? Because when you look at the stat sheet, there's a lot of things that show you Indiana should not have won that game.
Yeah, I think that Purdue played Indiana basketball, Indiana style of basketball that's more conducive to this Indiana unit right now. Our Rob came in and saved the day because it was going downhill fast. He came in 17 points in the first half. He energized everybody. He infused energy in everyone. And that was the deciding factor in IU getting back in that game, because I believe that if Rob hadn't had that kind of performance, it would have been a 15-point Purdue win, because that's just where it was going. Trace was out. The energy was low, weren't playing well, and Rob came in and, it's a personal game for him. People have those games where, you were recruited by somebody and it's real personal and they've been talking crap to you for the last 3 years because he hadn't beat them at all. And, it's extra in it for him. So, but I think that Purdue played Indiana style of basketball. They were slow, methodical. That's a high scoring team that usually scores in the upper 80s to beat teams. And I think they scored in 60s. And
65, yep.
65. And that's not a Purdue performance. And it was a great game plan by the Hoosier staff, keeping that game slow. I don't know if they did it on purpose or it was just the lack of production that kept that game where it was, but it benefited us in the end.
Did you ever have any of those games where it meant it was a little bit more personal to you, like Rob had in that game?
Well, all of them were personal to me because I wasn't a highly recruited guy, and I was always playing against somebody either from my area or from my class that was recruited above me, so all of them were personal to me when it came to playing, because I was always trying to prove that I belonged and that I was just as good or better than those guys. Illinois was always special because, obviously Illinois, a lot of my high school counterparts were playing for Illinois at that time. But any team with any guy from Central Illinois or Peoria, I had one of my high school counterparts was at Purdue. 3 of them were at Illinois. One of them was at Wisconsin at the time. My freshman and sophomore year, one was at Iowa. Like, we were all over the place. So every time I played against those guys, one was at Michigan. Every time I played against those guys, it was personal. So I know that extra energy that you feel to be productive. It's not like you can force it, but you can feel that energy to rally the troops and do something special. And I think that's what eventually carried us to a victory that day.
We've all heard the Bob Knight film where he says he's sick and effing tired of losing to Purdue and all that stuff. Was there seriously like an extra emphasis by Coach Knight when you guys went into a Purdue game?
I mean, I really didn't know it until after my freshman year. Coach Knight, we knew that Purdue was the rival, and we knew that as incoming freshmen that we were supposed to win. I think the Indiana guys knew it better than I did. But I remember after the first Purdue game, we got walloped up there at Purdue. And I didn't have a good game. I know that. I just remember it being so loud, and I remember it being so intense. I remember everybody just being on edge. I remember after that game was an infamous moment in time for me at Indiana when we had the infamous 125 suicides. So, we had. After that game, we flew home. I believe that game was on a Saturday night or Friday night. We flew home. We drove home, got home at about 1 in the morning, and we had practice at 6 in the morning. So we practiced at 6 in the morning. Next practice was at noon. So we practiced at noon, and these practices weren't regular practices. These were all competitive drills. Every turnover was a sprint. Every missed block out was a sprint. So it's like you're damn if you do, if you damn if you don't. I'm quick and I'm athletic. If I steal the ball, it's a sprint for us all. So it's like, do I really take the ball, or what do I do here? So it was a no-win situation. We were going. Then we were told to come back that night at 6 p.m. to practice again.
Three practices in a day?
3 practices. I should have called the NCAA. Now that I think about it, like, why didn't I call the NCAA? But then there were 3. I mean, I'm telling you, we were playing 3-on-3 full court. We on both courts. We didn't use the whole assembly, or we used both courts. And Indiana had at least 30 managers. So each manager had a player. So whenever I didn't block out, that was a sprint. Whenever I turned the ball over, that was a sprint. Whenever he felt like I took a bad shot, it was a suicide, not a sprint, a suicide. So in the afternoon, we went over to what was that? I forgot the place we used to practice. That was it's called the barn. It's not the field house, but we used to practice there. Girls volleyball used to be their home volleyball.
Oh,
yeah. What was it called?
University Gymnasium?
University Gym. I think we went over there to practice the second practice, and that's where the sprints had to be counted. So each manager was on the bench on the baseline with a clipboard, like, all right, run, that's 1. Run, that's 2. So we as a team, we ran 125 suicides as a team. We ran for like 2 hours and a half straight. And guys were crying, and it was guys walking. I'm just jogging. I'm running is never a punishment to me. I never understood that, because it's actually helping you. You get in tip-top shape. But I just remember that was my introduction to how important playing well against Purdue was. You know what I'm saying? And I, it was a moment in time that none of my counterparts will ever forget. So that was my introduction to it.
Yeah, you're not gonna play lackadaisically against Purdue after that. Absolutely.
Oh no! After that, the whole thing changed. We ended up losing the next game and over a last-second shot by Chad Austin. I made a 3 to tie it, and then he dribbled it out and hit a fadeaway, a tough shot. But he wasn't. We competed.
Yeah,
we was right there. So he wasn't as upset. Only thing coaches Coach Knight didn't like losing to were coaches that he assumed were cheaters. That's we noticed that. I'm not gonna name any names. It was like
we're not putting anybody on blast here.
It was like 4 coaches in the Big Ten, like, no, we lose to them, it's hell to pay, because we don't lose to the cheating team. So, but we got our understanding. I got my understanding of what it was like to lose. What would it be like to lose to Purdue or not play up to our standards against Purdue?
So then on the flip side, these guys this year finally understand what it's like to beat Purdue. What were those moments like for you when you finally did knock off the Boilermakers?
I mean, like I said, we lost the first 2 my freshman year. So to beat them finally my sophomore year was like the national championship. Like, it was like, because I think, but prior to that, they had lost like, maybe like it was a 4 or 5 game losing streak, I believe, from the class before me that hadn't beat them either. So we extra emphasis in the summer, like when I'm lifting weights and I'm running, it was like, we got to win this game. We got to get this monkey off our back. And I think, 2 monkeys that Indiana had to get off their back. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I know people don't use that term anymore, but 2 things that they had to overcome were the road losing streak and beating Purdue.
Yep.
And I felt as if like the road losing streak, you could exhale after that a little bit, because that's all people are going to talk about. Losing to Penn State, losing the teams you shouldn't lose to. But getting that Purdue monkey, overcoming that Purdue issue is equally important. And I think it was a little bit too much of an exhale as you see the performance they had against Michigan.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because as good as the Purdue game was, it was that bad against Michigan. You said it, and I kind of thought this, and I was joking with some of my friends this week. I said it's like Indiana won the national championship when they beat Purdue. Yeah, and you even mentioned it right there. You felt like that when you beat them your sophomore year. So then how hard is it when you let's be honest, there's a reason there's no games for months after the national championship. It's because you party, you have your fun, you celebrate. Indiana has to turn around 3 days later, go play Michigan. I mean, It was something I personally saw it coming. I fear the worst when those kind of things happened, and the worst happened. Did you kind of see this coming? Did you feel like, oh boy, they might not be ready to go on Sunday?
Yeah, I kind of felt that they wouldn't play well, but I thought they would win.
Yeah.
And that because Michigan wasn't playing well and they were
Mhm.
struggling. This was Michigan's coming out game, and they caught IU at the right time. And Indiana's, you can tell the intensity wasn't there. You could tell there was a lot of hangover. Somebody was partying a little too much after the Purdue game. And I think you needed to kind of leadership is what helps with that. Because and that's in team leadership, not from the coaching staff or anybody. You got those guys know that, yeah, that was a celebratory win in a fashion that you wanted in. You deserve the right to celebrate, but there's business to be attended to, and I don't think that was a point of emphasis. I think people are going to use that as an excuse, but it's no excuse when you come from, when you're a Big Ten basketball player, man. It don't matter if that team coming in was Rutgers. It don't matter if that team was Northwestern. You had to shift your mind to say, we have business to take care of. And after we celebrate tonight, our business-like approach has to be shown in practice the next morning. We got to come out with a fire that's undeniable. And to start the Michigan game, Trace Jackson gets a dunk to start the game and a screen, and it went downhill from there. So I was just like, he was the only one excited because he didn't have a great game against Purdue. The rest of the guys were just like, they partied a little. It looked like they partied a little too hard. So I did kind of expect to answer your question, I expected a little bit of a letdown, but I felt like we would wake up in the second half and overcome a team that has been struggling. And I think that it didn't happen that way. Let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now's the time, because they're offering a $250 match bonus for our first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one play to turn your money into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With football season kicking off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Mike Woodson's gotten a lot of questions this week about the starting lineup because you and I have touched on it. Not only the starts of games, but the starts of second halves have been a huge issue for Indiana this year. And that typically both starts to halves are the same five guys on the floor. He has said he's not planning on making any changes to the starting lineup. I know, obviously, we are not Mike Woodson, but if you were in his shoes, would you be thinking about a change?
We talked about this. Do you remember what my answer was when you asked me the last time? Was Mike Woodson going to change?
You said yes, but he's not going to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not going to do it because Mike Woodson is an old school hooper that just old school coaches they don't believe in change. You know what I mean? But I think he does. I think that they're defensively. They struggle a little bit with the starting lineup because of I think teams are targeting Xavier and Parker Stewart because Xavier because they know he's going to foul him, and Parker Stewart because he's just not a great defender yet, and Miller Kopp because he's not a great defender. You know what I'm saying? So I think I would bring Miller Kopp off the bench. I would start probably Trey Galloway, and if you don't want to start Trey Galloway, then you have to start Jordan Geronimo. We at the 3 position, which is a position I believe he can play because you have to get started, especially on the roads. You have to get started well defensively first, and then use that defense to capitalize on offense. But he's not going to change it, so I don't even know why we're talking about this.
We talk about it because that's what we do. We just pretend we have control over things and pretend that we can actually do something about it. Looking back at the Purdue game, though, we should give some shout outs to some guys who played really well. Trace Jackson Davis not in the game. That opened it up for Michael Durr, and I think that was his best game as a Hoosier so far. Very
solid, very steady. They needed it because of Purdue's two-headed monster. with Edey and Williams. And I think he stabilized those guys. I think he caused them problems. He had a couple jump shots, scored some points, and I think he was a stabilizing factor in enabling and helping IU's defensive game plan to work. Is by slowing them down, making them play through the post. They weren't as efficient in the post as they are against other teams because of his strength and his length. He was able to contest shots and make it more difficult for them. So, he's to be commended for his role in helping Indiana win that basketball game.
As good of a rim protector as Trace is, I think Michael was the perfect matchup in that game because he's just a bigger body. And he's a lot more to work up against for Zach Edey or Travion Williams. Trace is a great shot blocker, but Michael is just bigger and just taller. He's just broad. He's just a bigger guy. And I think he presented some issues. Xavier Johnson, you mentioned some of the foul issues. I think he's been doing much better with that of late. And he's been bringing a lot of energy to this team.
Yeah, he has a different dimension, and he's kind of I look at him as the Russell Westbrook of Indiana basketball. I mean, it's like, okay, if it's working, we love you, but when it ain't working, you need to slow down and get others involved. And for that particular game, it worked because there's not one of Purdue's weaknesses is perimeter defense, in my opinion. Those guys, Eric Hunter and Stepanovich, as you can see, the last two plays of the game, Stepanovich was behind Chase and Finney on those shots. That the first one he missed, second one he made, but the separation was a big gap because he's just not a good defender. And Xavier was able to expose and attack those. So as Rob was, so that's why I believe Rob and Xavier had stellar games, because if you want to poke a weakness out of Purdue's team, I think it's their perimeter defense. And just like IU, it can be their inconsistency offensively on the perimeter as well.
Yeah, Xavier's been playing really well. He's scoring the basketball. He's bringing that. It almost feels like he has toned that energy into a positive here of late for Indiana, whereas there were a few games there where it felt like he was a little bit over the top. So Indiana, I think it's safe to say, lays an egg against Michigan on Sunday, but now they bounce back. Today they've got Penn State. This feels like a must-win game for Indiana. A lot of the bracketologists had this team anywhere between an 8 to a 10 seed. And that basically means, A, good job, you're in the field right now. And that, let's be honest, that's one of the main goals that this team wanted to accomplish before the season. But B, that means there's not a lot of leeway in terms of losing games you're supposed to win. So tonight is one of those games Indiana has to win, have to protect your home floor.
After laying the egg against Michigan, you have to have a great showing tonight, and you have to win this basketball game. Is it the end of your season if you lose? No, but it could be a big morale crusher if you do lose this game from a fan standpoint and a team standpoint, because you're starting. Then you wonder, like, okay, was Purdue a fluke? Was it just an opportunity to overcome something that we've been on? Now we're satisfied, and that's what I'm interested in seeing, because against Michigan, it looked like they were satisfied. Oh, yeah, we did it. Everybody cool. They off our backs now. Everybody happy. We beat Purdue. Shut up. Okay, but you still got 10 games left, man. Like, we have to. So it's a very important how they come out, the energy level they come out with this game, and establishing how they're going to play that game. But and as people talk about, I think IU's biggest issue is the inconsistency in the backcourt. And I think if you look at championship teams, there was no inconsistency in the backcourt. You know what you're going to get from your lead guards, from your shooting guards, and your wing players. And I think we have to continue to establish that. We're still not shooting the basketball as we should, but because we were good enough defensively against Purdue and we scored just enough, we had a guy get hot, roll and go on a roll against Purdue. We overcame that, but that's not going to be every night. Teams aren't going to score 65 points and slow the game down. They're going to attack you. They're going to score points. So we have to come out and make sure that I don't know how many points Finney had against Michigan. 2, maybe.
Yeah, 0? I don't even know. 2 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like 17-4. This shows you the inconsistency. You come back out and you get 12 and 5. You're showing consistency as a guard. So this is my issue with Indiana basketball, and that's just going to keep us from taking that next step that we can take. So this is an ultra important game for each player to come in and contribute and get this win.
I will say the Nebraska game for sure, and then second half there were some times against Michigan where Mike Woodson was drawing up some sets for Parker Stewart, and he was knocking down some threes. And I think fans would like to see that more often. I'll ask this to you. Obviously, in a perfect world, you'd love to come down the floor every possession. Parker Stewart curls around a screen, gets an open three. Tell the fans why that can't happen every time down the floor.
We can't become a focus, man. We have to continue to do what we do offensively to be successful, and that's play inside out. And that's using pick and that's not just throwing it in the post, but that's using pick and roll to create advantages, to create double teams in the post, kickouts, things of that nature. For me, a guy like Parker Stewart, what he has to do is you have to become more of a transition runner. You have to begin to get things in transition. You got to be the first guy down the floor. You got to sprint. There's no open sprint down the floor to get to the line and get set up, because if you get there early enough, then the defense will pull with you because you are a 45% three-point shooter. Yeah. But if you're jogging with the rest of the guys, then you're not going to get those shots. You have to get yourself involved. You have to run the lanes, get layups in transition. You have to get steals. You can't just rely on people to run offensive sets for you. That's like, in the NBA, running your sets for Kyle Korver every time down the floor. But you have a guy like Trae Young on your team that needs the basketball. So that's not going to be something you see all the time. I think it's another dimension that Indiana can add to get him a couple shots. But when I wanted shots, and I was the focal point of everybody's defense. But you cannot prepare for movement outside of what people expect you to do. A team can't prepare for you to sprint, get steals. A team can't prepare for you to get to the basket and create your own shot or create a shot for someone else. There's so many things that you can do offensively, but when they double Trace Jackson Davis, Race Thompson is on the floor, or another guy that's not shooting a high clip from the three-point line, they're going to stay with Parker Stewart, and they're going to stunt at the other guys and allow them to shoot. When Trace hit the three, I think against Michigan, or he was like 3 for something for the post.
I think 3 for 23 or something like that.
Yeah. So that's the game plan. And somebody on that bench said, "Thank you. That's better than Parker shooting that. That's better than or even Xavier, for example. He's inconsistent shooting threes as well. So as you saw, Minnesota tried that strategy. They're going to live with that. Yep. All right, cool. Y'all beat us. Cool. Rob had some 15 that game. This guy had this, but that cannot be the focal point. Parker's going to have to find ways to get himself involved offensively and not you expect it from anybody else.
Yeah, Hoosiers back at home tonight against Penn State. We saw last week against Purdue how much of a difference Assembly Hall can make. That place was rocking. Well, I know you always said you tuned out crowds when you played. Do you have any fun stories about playing in Assembly Hall, any big games where the place was just nuts?
I for some reason, man, I have not very many memories of because people come up to me all the time and say, "Man, we used to chant your name. We had signs. We had sections for you." And I'm like, I don't remember any of that. Because it's just you have to lock in. Because I always say, if you know what's going on outside, you're not focused. You're not locked in. Now, when we go up 20 or something like that, we go to the bench. This is when I start looking around, and usually nothing's happening. We up 20, but I do remember like the roars of the crowd, and I made shots so I could hear that roar. Yeah, it was like I gotta make this because I gotta have that feeling. Or when they yelled 3 as you're shooting the basketball, like that was like in Purdue games and the big games, Michigan games, and like that was the greatest feeling in the world to rise up for a shot and everybody put their hands in the air and start yelling before it even goes in. And then when it goes in, it's just this big explosion. And that reminded me of the old days last night. The other night with the Purdue game, and I think it's one of those signature games. Rob Finney's obviously going to be remembered for the rest of his life, whether he averages 2 points for the rest of the season. Everybody's going to remember him for making that shot. And I think similar to Watford's shot with Tom Crean, it could signal the elevation of a team if we use it the right way. Sad part is we failed the mission with Michigan, but we got more games to go. See if we can build on those and create momentum going into the postseason.
Yeah, I hate to plant the seed in fans' heads, but they win today. They jump to 6-4 in conference play. That puts them in solo sixth in the Big Ten. And then you've got Maryland, and then you've got Illinois at home, and a chance maybe to start stacking some wins. So we'll see. But it all starts today. When are we getting AJ Guyton back in the Hall? That's what all the people are wondering. We're going to get him front row, courtside, going crazy, jumping up and down. When are we getting AJ in the Hall?
I'm looking to come sometime in February. The only reason I haven't come now is because, I'm an athletic director.
Yeah, you've got a job.
My season is almost, basketball season is almost over. Basketball season is the most intense season here, and it runs from January to the beginning of February. So middle of February, end of February, you should see me at a game.
Love it. We'll get you there for sure. AJ, always good. This has been fun. We've got plenty of episodes coming up here as the season continues to dwindle down, but always good to get together here and recap some of these games. A roller coaster week for the Hoosiers. They'll take on Penn State tonight, 8:30. Are they winning, AJ?
Yes, we should win this. This is a must-win game. I expect Indiana to win this game.
All right. AJ says they're going to win. I agree with them. We'll see what happens tonight at 8:30. AJ, lots of fun. We'll do it again. This has been the House of Hoosier podcast in the Field of 68 Podcast Network.